It was an intense discussion. Lives and souls were in the balance. The Salvation Army pastor was there, and so were our friends. You see, my grandma had made some contacts with these friends, and we had begun Bible studies. And then when we got to some of the more testing truths, they decided they wanted the counsel of their pastor. So, in came the Salvation Army pastor, and the topic was the Sabbath. Simple, right? Well, the pastor posed one serious argument. Prove to me where in the Bible you find the Sabbath as a day of worship before the Jews. Simple, right? Go back to Genesis, creation. Hold on. The evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day. The third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Where's the seventh evening and morning? It was just a period of rest. Shabbat. He'd ceased his creation. And it was all Sabbath after that. And then when the Garden of Eden ended, there wasn't any more Sabbath, and there will be Sabbath again in the new earth. So, how do you define it? Why am I a Seventh-day Adventist? Why are you a Seventh-day Adventist? My cousin Josh, he's an agnostic. He was raised with a Seventh-day Adventist background. And he said, he essentially considers Christians to be stupid, unenlightened individuals who believe in this false theory that so much of the world believes in. People made it up. It's not real stuff. History doesn't validate it. It doesn't line up with the historical record. Have you ever heard of science? Come on. Faith? What use is it to me? It's dead. It's worthless. I'll read you a Facebook post that he posted just last year. Christian friends, I need your help. When did Jesus Christ become a capitalist? Because these fundamentalists got to be confused. Christ wanted his followers to be filthy rich. Stephen Moore and Pat Robertson seem to think so. Please enlighten your agnostic friend. That's my cousin. Well, what's his background? Seventh-day Adventist. And so is mine. But it's not a perfect background. My great-grandpa was an alcoholic. And of all his 3 children, my grandpa was the only one who really remained a steadfast Seventh-day Adventist. He had serious anger issues. And as God told Moses, the sins of the fathers are passed down to the 3rd and the 4th generation. My dad and I have had to face these things, and I'll come back to this in a minute. I'm a 5th-generation Adventist. I was born in Africa as a missionary kid, raised with a Seventh-day Adventist background and solid principles. But, as someone once said famously, God doesn't have any grandkids. And the reason I'm a Seventh-day Adventist today is really simple. I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist. I believe that my faith is worth believing and defending. And God has changed my life. My grandparents were missionaries. My parents were missionaries. And I then inherited a lot of principles and standards from my parents and grandparents, which I've been familiar with since I was a youngster. But as some say, familiarity can sometimes breed contempt. Now, why is my faith worth believing and defending? Let me take you back about 2 years. March 2010. There I stood with my class on the edge of Castellizzo. You see, we had taken a mission trip to Romania and then spent a week in Italy. And we went to those Waldensian Alps where those pure Christians lived, worked, and worshipped, believing the Bible instead of the Roman traditions. I stood on the edge of the cliff where on April 24th, 1665, several thousand Waldenses were herded off the edge of the cliff over a 300-foot drop to their deaths. My class stood on the edge and said, we don't have a faith that's worth dying for. There's no way. But I stood on the edge of that cliff, and I knew I had a faith that was worth dying for. But it hadn't always been that way. You see, from about the age of 12 until that day, I had begun developing an experiential religion, my own personal experience with God. I had an amazing Daniel and Revelation class, which grounded me in solid principles of biblical interpretation and how to study prophecy for myself. I knew creation science. I'd been introduced to that. I'd been exposed to Restoration International, a ministry which probably saved my family. I had begun having consistent personal devotions from about the age of 13 on. And so by the time I got to Castelluzzo, I knew I had a faith that was worth defending, believing in, and dying for. Now, the next reason why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist is because my life was changed. Like I said, my great-grandfather was an alcoholic, and he had a terrible temper. One of his children was never quite right, and it was probably due to traumatic abuse, either in utero or as a youngster. My great-grandfather ended up getting a divorce when my dad was 4 because he couldn't hold down a stable job. He was bipolar, and he had a really bad temper problem. My dad grew up without real role models, and the people he worked with, he didn't know anything better. But God has enabled me to overcome these inherited defects, things that people would say, and psychologists would say, I was born to live with. Only God could grant me the meekness I have today. So you ask me, why am I the Seventh-day Adventist? Quite simply, I was born into a family that was Seventh-day Adventist, raised that way. Then born a Seventh-day Adventist, raised that way. I believe my faith is worth believing in and dying for. And my apologies, I'm really nervous. And God has changed my life. And why are you a Seventh-day Adventist? Is it just because mom and dad are? Is it intellectual merely? I know the Sabbath is the day I ought to be going to church on. Or have you seen and tasted that the Lord is good? I've seen and tasted that the Lord is good. I have purpose and peace my cousin Josh, who's an agnostic, does not have. I have a faith that's worth living and dying for. And I have a heart for service thanks to my amazing